So that was a whole big preamble. Now let's get into the actual nitty-gritty and stuff. So kick off your shoes and socks. Let's give this a try and see what we can actually do to get ourselves a little bit stronger. So the very first thing that I wanted to talk about today, and the first exercise that I want to demonstrate to you guys, is called the short foot exercise. But before we do that, let's just start a little bit of a warm-up and just see how flexible things are right now, and give you guys something to work on going forward. So, remember how I said the whole thing about having that surgery where I ended up with one really big leg length discrepancy? So, you know, if you see me out of my sandals and all of a sudden I seem a lot shorter, it's because my one side is significantly shorter than the other one. So, first thing here, let's grab the green ball in front of you. And you're just going to stand in the middle of that green ball. And you're just going to work it through your foot. Ball in front of you, get it right into your arch, and you just want to move it around. Heel to the ball of your foot. You can move it around the heel specifically itself. Kind of get it into the ball of your foot, into your toes and around your toes. And if you are moving it around one particular spot and you end up finding that there's like a really sensitive point, whether you want to call it a muscle knot or a trigger point or anything else, what we end up finding a lot of the time is that when muscles are chronically tight, you can get these things like trigger points or muscle knots, and we want to work those things out. So you kind of want to hang out in that spot there, kind of move it over side to side and a little bit forward to back, and just kind of hold that one spot. If you can find that one spot that hurts, you want to breathe in. Remember to breathe doing this. A lot of people can hold their breath. Just hang out in that spot, maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and as you feel that spot start to release, you can slowly again start rolling, heel to the ball of your foot. All right, once that one side is done, you feel comfortable on that one side, let's move it to the other one. Anyone find any good spots in the bottoms of their feet? No, yes, right? Yeah. How about you?
Very much.
That's it, right? And so again, if you find that spot, just hang out in that one spot, right? And just kind of work it in there. Remember to breathe, stay in that one spot, hang out 10, 15 seconds. As soon as you start feeling it ease off, you can kind of work it in. Again, when you look at how many small muscles are deep inside your feet, and you think about that, it's not uncommon to get that one spot that's just, contracting like crazy over and over and over again, and have that spot tighten up quite a bit. Whew. All right, so next thing, have a seat but come close to the edge of your chairs. Now that we've kind of rolled out our feet and got things going. So come on up closer here. So what I want you to do now is you're going to kind of bend your knee up, you're going to hold your foot, and what I want you to try is take your toes, I want you to curl your toes down as much as you can. Now, before we do this, I've got to preface the fact that a lot of the stuff that we're going to do, you might cramp up today, okay? The bottom of your foot might go into spasm. That's okay. When it does, just stop, take your toes, pull your toes back towards your shins to help release that cramp, okay? You might feel it specifically in this kind of warm up here. So what we want to do, the very first thing is you're just going to move big circles in the ankle. All right, so we're going to get the ankle moving. Okay, switch it up, other direction. Now, try this. Give this a go here. Take your toes, scrunch them down as much as you possibly can, and what you want to do is keep that range of motion with your toes fully scrunched. Now, a lot of people, they're going to cramp here, and their toes going to do this when they hit that end range of motion. So you want to take your toes, make sure that you can keep them all the way down, and that's the same amount when your foot is fully plantar flexed all the way down. And then you're just going to work that general range of motion. If that feels super tight, one of the simplest things you can do, we talked a bit about your plantar fascia, or the fascia on the bottom part of your foot, but you also have something called your dorsal fascia, which is the fascia on the top part of your foot. So if you want to give that a stretch, if you find that this is actually really tight when you're fully plantar flexed, grab it. So just put your ankle over top of your knee there. You're going to grab onto your toes with the other hand. Again, flex those toes down. and then you're going to rotate your foot towards you. And you should feel that pull all down the top of your foot here and in your ankle. What do you think there, Bonnie? You feel that pull kind of down in this area here? Yeah. And so again, we don't want to go into pain. All right, you want to go where you're feeling a light, easy stretch, but really no more than that. And once you've done that, try it again. So same thing, grab onto your knee, flex the toes down, and just work that range of motion. What does that feel like? Does that feel easier? Maybe a little bit? And again, you want to try to keep those toes flexed all the way in that plantar flex position. So basic warm-up, right? A little bit of rolling, a little bit of flexing, a little bit of mobility stuff. If that's hard to do right out of the gate, did anybody find that difficult to keep their toes flexed when they were fully plantar flexed? Or, yeah, you found that a bit hard? What do you think? A little bit? Did you?
It was okay on this, but I'm not sure about it.
I'm not sure on that one, right? Yeah, so I mean, that's some of the simplest stuff to start working on, right? You can see that there was an imbalance between your two different feet, that it was a little bit harder to do on one side, versus another one. And so basic things that we can work on to get things a bit better. So next thing we want to work on is moving your toes. And so you can see here there are 3 different ways that we're going to do that. So the very first thing is I want you to take your toes, I want to take your foot, and I want you to see how much can you move your toes. If you're taking it by your hands and spreading your toes apart like that, try spreading your toes as much as you possibly can. Let's see, there we go. Kyle? And again, so if you take those toes, you can see if that's my baseline, and there we're trying to spread them as much as we possibly can, and bringing them back to center, and again, spreading them out as much as you possibly can, and bringing them back to center. So you can see how some of our toes move, right? Some of our toes move here all the way, and some toes are kind of like, squished together and don't move very much. And so, and not all of your toes are moving, right? No. And now, when did the toes start to split?
This here?
Yeah.
That just happened in the last couple of months.
That happened in the last couple of months. Okay. Had you been using any like off-the-shelf device or toe spreaders or any of those kinds of things? No? Okay. So sometimes, and if you come down here, Vanessa, and so sometimes when you see this spreading of the toes here, what can end up happening is that either there's been a capsular tear, or sometimes the ligament in between those two metatarsal heads has been compromised in some kind of way. What I've actually seen in the past of people who've come into clinic who've expressed that kind of toe spreading is they've been using these toe separator devices that you can buy online that take all of your toes, they go in between your toes and spread them out. The problem is that the spaces in between some of your larger toes and the spaces in between some of your smaller toes aren't exactly the same width. And so if your toes are like really, together because you can't move those muscles, and all of a sudden you force one of those devices in there, sometimes that can cause a tear and cause the exact same problem you've got going on. Other times you've done something to injure that area of your foot. As soon as you start seeing that splaying happen, you can buddy tape your toes together or use some kind of a toe loop. Just make sure that there's some kind of padding in between your toes so you don't wind up with a corn. And that way it should help to stave off progression once things start to scar down. And of course, going to see your physio or someone that's going to be able to help with that would be a good thing. But once it's gone like that and once it's stabilized, it's probably not going to change too much more, either for the good or for the bad. And so with that right now, again, so we're going to try to just do 5 to 10 repetitions of this. So normal foot, spread your toes as wide as you possibly can. Okay, pull your toes back in together. Spread those toes as wide as you possibly can. And pull those toes back in together. And what we're working here is some of these longer muscles in between the metatarsals that actually work to add, to AD or AB duct and move the toes away from the midline of your foot and then back in. Now, for people who can't get their toes, actually spread apart and moving, some of the simplest things that you can do is just take your fingers and work your fingers in between your toes. And so once your fingers are in between your toes that way, you can start moving that range of motion back and forth forth, try to get things, moving around again. Again, I always caution people against using some of these aggressive toe spreading devices because in clinic we've seen more than a small amount of people who have come in with new injuries because these toe spreaders are becoming very, very common. You see them prescribed a lot in the yoga classes and things like that. And when you don't use them the right way, no matter what it is, there's always a way that you could hurt yourself, right? So if you don't go slow with some of these things, you can wind up with a new problem like toe spreading or new kinds of pain. And so if you grab your fingers and move them in between your toes, and again, don't crank them out. If all you can do is just spread them a couple of millimeters, that's okay to start with, okay? Just enough to be able to get those toes moving again. And really, you want to just get it in there and then start moving your foot back and forward and twisting side to side. What you're trying to do is just wake up your brain and your foot overall. A lot of the time, there's sort of a disconnect. If you've had pain in your feet, it's no different than having an ankle sprain where your body says, oh, wow, that hurts. Let's stop using that area as much as we possibly can so that it doesn't hurt anymore. But then once you start feeling better, your brain doesn't always turn that area back on again. Sometimes you need to, actually start doing some of these exercises to be able to get the foot moving again. Again, where we're spreading out our toes and back towards and then spreading them out again. Any change? A little bit, yeah. And then another, part that I was actually taught by a guy named Gary Lipinski, who was a great athletic therapist and teacher at Western, was to just take a finger and kind of poke around the area where you want your brain to kind of wake up to and say, hey brain, it's sort of this part of my foot that we're trying to wake up again and start moving again. And once you start making those neural connections where your brain goes, oh, this is what I have to do, then these things get a whole lot easier at the end of the day. Now, here's an advanced move. Take your foot, normal foot, just move your fifth toe. Can you do it without moving all your other toes? Right? Now, this is a muscle called your abductor digiti minimi. It's a really tiny muscle on the outside part of your foot. Yeah, I know, it's a funny name, but it's what it is. And so the idea with this one is that, do you have enough neuromuscular control? Can you have enough control of your brain over top of your foot muscles to be able to just move that fifth toe in that way? Now, this stuff takes practice. Trust me, my feet did not look like these in the beginning, and I wasn't able to do stuff like this until I really started working at it and working hard at it. And again, like any other exercise you would do anywhere else, until you start really devoting some time to it, then how could you ever expect to get better, right? But for people who have had foot problems in the past, or who don't want to maybe have foot problems in the future, getting better aligned, getting your brain to work with your foot in a way that's going to get your foot muscles stronger and reduce the effects of things like fatigue, it's only going to be a positive thing. So next one we can try, once we've done that, is what I want you to do here is keep your lesser toes on the ground, pick your big toe up. So little toes on the ground, big toe up, back down again, and we're doing this for reps. And so oftentimes if you start by taking your heel, putting your foot into the ground, kind of holding onto the ground with some of those smaller toes, lifting the big toe up, putting the big toe down, so big toe up. Now, can you do the opposite thing? Can you keep your big toe firmly planted, lift your lesser toes up? All right, so next one we want to talk about here is what's called a short foot exercise. This is the one where I think once you start getting control over your feet, control over these muscles, where you're able to say, okay, I just want to move my little toe, or I want to move my lesser toes up and keep my big toe down. Once you're able to move your feet and you know that these smaller, deeper intrinsic muscles are working, the next one is like the kind of the hallmark of intrinsic foot strengthening. It's called the short foot exercise. It's the one that we see in most textbooks. It's the one that's been studied the most. And I'm going to change my angle here so that the camera can see it better. Vanessa, can you see my arch well through that? Okay, so if I take my foot here and say this is my foot, you know, my regular arch, and what I want to do is lift my arch up, but keep all my toes on the ground, this is what the short foot looks like. So what you're doing is you're scraping your toes along the ground and lifting your arch up by contracting the muscles deep and the back part of your foot. So a lot of people, they end up cheating with this exercise and they do this. They use their flexors and they use their toes and they try to lift their arch by flexing their toes. Or they lift their arch by doing this and they try to invert their foot and again, grabbing with their toes to pull them off the ground. What you want to do is keep all of your toes firmly planted. And again, you're lifting that arch straight up and then back down again. And once you can get the hang of this, that's when you can start doing it. Now, you can see here how you're starting to get the hang of it, but your big toe, the big joint here, is lifting up off the ground. So you want to keep that joint on the ground and pull the arch up and pull the foot back. And so you can see, oftentimes, what ends up happening is the exercise looks, so it's more, so relax your foot for a sec, it's more like that. And so it's this motion here that you're trying to do by getting these muscles in here to all work back up again. And oftentimes, again, you can tell yourself kind of, just poke around the foot here to be able to say to your brain, hey, wake up again. This spot of my foot is where you're trying to actually get it working again. Plus a lot of the muscles that are deeper in the kind of bigger layers back in there. And so who here thinks they can do a good short foot? What do you think? You think you're able to do it?
That wasn't too bad.
Okay, cool. Let's see it. There you go. And so, yep, lifting the arch, you're keeping that stuff on the ground, and you're able to pull some of that back. So you can see there that even if you look at some of the muscles on the sides of your feet, you can see as you do it, they're starting to contract. Now, as you get better at this, you're going to be able to make that contraction stronger, and you're going to be able to pull your arch up even higher. What do you think?
Not a chance.
Not a chance? So there's sort of, when we look at what the research says, what the textbooks say about how to show this to people, there are some people that do have a good sort of neuro connection where their brain, their foot, everything's talking well and they can execute that movement. Other times they need the help of a professional, so a foot specialist, a physiotherapist, an athletic therapist, to do what's called some assisted modeling to be able to get that foot moving in the right direction. So again, it's having someone coming down and while you're trying to work those muscles, show you, just relax your foot, that this is what you're trying to get your foot to do here, is you're looking at this sort of motion. And as you try to contract that as hard as you can, I'll move your foot. And as that whole idea gets stronger, you'll be able to do more of this on your own as things go. And you can move that from sort of semi-assisted modeling to you doing it on your own. Where you can see there that you're kind of moving the foot out. And so you're trying to pull, you're trying to pull the front part of your foot onto the back part of your foot by raising up your arch. And so there you go. And so just like that. Yeah, using those muscles deep in there. Yeah, and so again, this takes practice to do. Now there's other times when people just can't get the motion down, or their foot has gotten so weak from injury or anything else that they just can't wake up that neural connection. It's also been proposed that you could take those electrical stim pads, put it on the bottom parts of your feet, and through a professional like a physiotherapist, work on giving some electrical stim to those muscles to get them waking up again, so that again your brain understands what you're trying to do, and that you get this muscle firing pattern happening again too. Those are in the extreme cases when you really can't do it yourself, that you can do more with someone who's a professional like a good physio. And so if you can't get the hang of this, I would definitely book an appointment and talk to someone who can help kind of work you through some of this stuff. Now, when we look at some of the research that's been designed out there. This is Dr. Davis, who is a great researcher, one of the Harvard lab, the Spalding lab is affiliated with Harvard. She was one of the first ones to propose this whole idea of the foot core and why we want to strengthen the muscles in our feet the way we would strengthen the muscles of our core. It's produced a little bit of controversy because, some people have grabbed it and have kind of taken hold of it and said, well, if this is the case, then anything that doesn't make you use your foot muscles as much, like shoes or orthotics or that kind of stuff, is going to be bad for you. It's going to make you weaker. It's going to make you have a dependence on stuff. And we know that that just isn't true. So there's actually research that looked at using something like the short foot exercise in people who had really flat feet. And they looked at the difference between just doing a short foot or giving them a custom orthotic and doing the short foot exercise, and actually found that they got stronger when they were doing the short foot using the orthotic rather than just doing short foot on their own. There are other people on the internet who are saying that orthotics are only good for like 0.001% of the population. Again, that's just not true. If we look just in the United States at two things, diabetes and osteoarthritis, when we look at the prevalence of those two conditions and the published literature that says that orthotics can not only reduce the likelihood of foot complications and diabetes, things like ulcers, but also that they can increase people's perceptions of pain, they can decrease people's perceptions of pain and increase their functions in things like osteoarthritis. Just those two conditions in the States alone means that tens of millions of people, not 0.001%. So why do I think that this stuff is out there, that people are saying this kind of stuff, is because it's really easy to get clicks and to sell your stuff when you're selling controversy. It's really easy to say that's right and this is wrong without a good handle on the actual research that exists when you're trying just to get someone to click on your stuff and sell them maybe a little bit of fake news. And so what we're looking at and what we like to look at is how do we combine things like strengthening with things like proper shoes, orthotics, and other types of solutions depending on what your condition is, to be able to come up with an individual and a tailored treatment program for you specifically. So does that mean that if you wear orthotics, you can never go without them and do, barefoot stuff and try to, walk on the beach barefoot or do those things? No, it doesn't mean that. Of course you can do that kind of stuff. Doing a little bit of both together, I think, is way better than doing either one of them just on their own, especially when you have pain, right? If you're completely fine and you don't have any pain, you don't have any problems, there's no risk factors, and you don't have things like diabetes and osteoarthritis or a previous history of injury, then you have to start asking yourself, why would you use an orthotic in those kinds of conditions? But what I'm talking about are the people who do have those conditions, the people who are injured, the people who are sore. Now, there are always exceptions to these rules. So things like diabetes, for instance, if you have reduced sensation and you're at a higher risk for something like an ulcer where you could lose your foot if you don't take these things seriously, then yes, in those conditions, you want to be in your shoes as much as you possibly can. But for the average person, even for the average injured person, getting out of your shoes and doing some of this stuff in combination with regular therapy is only going to be a positive thing for you. So we went through the short foot exercise, and you can really see there that change in height, that difference in the arch. But where does some of this stuff play into everyday life? Well, once you get really good at the short foot exercise, there are ways you can just do this, doing your everyday stuff. So Dr. Davis is that, again, that PhD that talked about using short foot in different things. We did an interview for my first plantar fasciitis book, and she said, one of the things I like to give to people is while they're standing in line at the grocery store, you can be sitting there holding your bags and thinking about keeping those arches up and actually performing a short foot exercise. You can take this even further by saying, okay, so now I can stand here, and I'm doing this in my sandals again because of the whole leg length discrepancy thing. But if I'm standing here and perform that short foot exercise, can I use that to keep myself from falling forward? So try this. Stand up for a sec. Just not you. So, last thing you want to do is lose your balance. And so you want to keep your feet nice and straight. All right, perform a short foot exercise. Keep your feet nice and strong, and start to bend forward a little bit, using only your feet to keep you from falling flat on your face. Do you feel that get harder the further forward you go? And can you feel the strain in your arch happen more, and those deeper muscles in your foot start to burn a little bit the further you go forward? So little things like this are the ways you can progress these exercises to try to give yourself better stability and a better footing on the ground.
Just when you help a person in the grocery store.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry. Just doing my short foot.
Just doing the short foot. So what's another way to keep your feet healthy? And one other way to keep your feet healthy is by managing your risk factors. And so we know that with things like having really tight calves, for instance, we know that that's an increased risk factor for developing things like, metatarsalgia, or pain in the front part of your foot. We also know that it's a risk factor for developing plantar fasciitis, or that debilitating heel disorder where it feels like someone's taking an ice pick and ramming it into the bottom of your heel when you wake up first thing in the morning. And what I always find interesting are people who come in that are significantly out-toed when they walk. So if you stand there, I mean, most people, right, their feet are perfectly straight. They're a little bit out-toed when we walk. That's kind of normal for human biomechanics. It are the ones that are really, really out-toed that start to make me wonder whether or not there's some kind of dysfunction happening at the calf, where the calf muscles themselves are really, really tight. And how we test for that is we want to keep your leg nice and straight, move your ankle to about 90 degrees, and then move it a little bit further from that. If you've got that much range of motion, that's about normal range of motion. But as humans, to walk, we have to get our leg over top of your foot. And when something is tightened up in the posterior musculature to make it so that can't happen anymore, then your body only has a couple of ways to compensate, and your body's really good at being able to compensate specifically for this kind of condition. So 3 things are going to happen. Either you're going to out-toe and pronate more to be able to get yourself forward, or you're going to lift your heel up sooner than you should, or sometimes a combination of all 3 of those things. And all of those things put more pressure on your metatarsal heads, more load through the small nerves in between each one of those bones. It loads your plantar fascia and puts more strain through your plantar fascia. So there's no wonder that this is a risk factor for developing, these kinds of foot pathologies. So you can see some foam rollers in front of you. Why don't we get onto the ground and we'll try doing some foam rolling. So a lot of the time when people talk about stretching out their calves, they talk about, and let me get my sandals off here. They talk about just doing some static stretching alone for their calf muscles. The problem is that if you have some of these muscle adhesions or muscle knots or trigger points or whatever you want to call them, stretching alone isn't going to be good enough to break those down so that you make headway enough to be able to get your calves more flexible. What you want to do first is break down those adhesions by foam rolling, doing some deep tissue massage, using a roller ball or something to get rid of those muscle knots. So simplest thing to do, get your calf on the foam roller. All right, and you're just going to move yourself around. So this isn't working on this surface. So you're going to move that around, and you're just moving around your calf. Yeah, there you go. And you want to find, oh here, I guess I can show that there for a second. Yeah, thanks. So right in there, you can do both at the same time and just move that around if you want to use both your arms, or you can just put one on the side and you're just going to move that around. So same thing as we do with anything else, you want to move through the entire part of the calf. So you want to move the whole thing around here, all the way around. And again, once you find those sore spots, hang out in them for a little while, okay? Give yourself a little bit of time to breathe. Again, make sure that you're breathing and just work around all of those muscles deep in your calf. Now, oftentimes people are going to find that they're the most sore kind of up in here and the upper outside part of their calf. That's where a lot of people find they get kind of trigger points through that, and other people right in the middle part of their calf through here. Now, once this becomes easy, you can put your other leg over top of it and do the same kind of rolling. It just adds weight. Now you can feel it once you hit one of those sore spots with the leg over top. It's a little bit more intense, right? Now the biggest part with this is never go into too much pain. You know what? It should be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable because you're breaking down some of these trigger points. But what you don't want to be screaming as you're doing it. You know, there was an interesting quote that I read in a textbook that said, if you haven't vomited after foam rolling your calves when they're really tight, then you didn't do it hard enough. I just don't believe in that kind of stuff. And so, so once you've done this for 2 or 3 minutes, one of the basic stretches you can do to help your calf. Let me just see, where's a good spot to do it over here? Move this stuff out of the way. So once you've done that stuff, you want to find a wall or something that's relatively immovable. You're going to want to put your shoe back on because you get better leverage for your feet. And what you're going to do is put your heel on the ground, put your toes up against the wall, keep your leg nice and straight, and just start to bend forward to work on stretching out that calf muscle. All right, so there's 2 different predominant muscles in your calves. There's your gastroc and your soleus. Your gastroc is the big fleshy one you can see on the outside that crosses your knee, and that's the one you're getting when your leg's nice and straight. The other one's called your soleus, which inserts below the knee, and I'll show you a foam rolling technique that can actually get into your soleus as well too. And so here you want to hold a light, easy stretch for 30 seconds to a minute.